The book, Security and Development in Global Politics, had an unusual birth in that we were lucky enough to have a funder who gave us some money and said, do something interesting and important with this money. And what we decided to do was to bring together a number of people who worked in the fields of security and development and have them talk about the same issues, but from their disciplinary or field perspective. And what we decided to do was to make it quite a rigorous structure and have, for each issue area, somebody from security and somebody from development talk about it, and then we'd actually be able to compare what they thought were the important issues within that area for their discipline.
Substantively, I think the book started off because of a puzzle that we saw emerge, I think, in the early years of the 21st century, whereby we looked at a range of international organizations, whether this was the United Nations, the World Bank, the European Union, or a variety of countries that were putting out different national security strategies, the United States and the United Kingdom. And all of them across the board were seeing some sort of combined nexus between the security and development fields. And we're saying that somehow these two concepts seem to be important in working together in productive and constructive ways. For example, the World Bank talked a lot about the need to secure development. We had national security strategies say that we couldn't achieve our security objectives without a certain level of economic development. And also in the academic literature, we found a whole range of people talking about a nexus that had emerged between security and development. So that was really the sort of starting point for putting the book together, because we were a little bit skeptical about some of the claims that there was a really easy and obvious relationship always between security and development. And so one of the ideas that we talk about in the book is that we think the nexus idea gets a little bit muddied, let's say, if we conceptualize security and development as fields that have got a lot of contestation going on in themselves. And we use the term arenas in the book to sort of flesh out the idea that it's very hard to see an obvious nexus or connection between security and development, because within both of these areas, or arenas as we call them, there's a lot of disputes going on between different theoretical approaches, between theorists and practitioners, and between practitioners themselves about what to do. So the stepping stone which we started the book from was that we have to be aware of these different areas of contestation within the different arenas of security and development. And this meant that there was not an obvious nexus between the two arenas.
I think, as Paul says, one of the things that motivated us was we had this sense that when the security field talked about development, they thought doing development was really straightforward. And when the development field talked about security, they thought that achieving security was really straightforward. So particularly in the context of the discussions about difficult problems like Afghanistan and Iraq and dealing with failing states, what you had was these two fields saying, well, we can now just use this other tool. We can use development or we can use security and everything will be okay. But knowing about their own fields and knowing all the problems in their own arena, somehow they projected perfectness onto the other area. So we were trying to unravel that a little bit and reintroduce some of the problems that particularly practitioners were glossing over. The desire for a nexus, they said it in the hope of making it so, as opposed to it really being so. So one of the things we were really doing in unpacking these different areas was saying, well, what's really going on, and are the agendas the same, and are they compatible? And we came up with a thought that on occasions they did come together, but often the agendas were really very different. And you got into areas of difficulty when the security world wanted to use development in a particular way, not understanding the timelines, the difficulties of what was going on, and then that led to a lot of frustration.
Again, we have, and the book discusses this in some detail, attempts or debates between theorists and practitioners to really try and convert what they found in sort of new theoretical innovation into practical innovation in the field, and vice versa. The problem we found, whether we look in places like Iraq or Afghanistan or elsewhere, was that sometimes practitioners were trying to implement very new and relatively untested theoretical ideas, and were finding a whole range of problems on the ground in trying to do that. And then vice versa, some of the theorists were sort of following the practitioners and looking at these new and innovative techniques in the field and trying to build theories based on this relatively well, limited base of evidence, let's say. And so there's been a very complicated relationship in terms of theory and practice between the two concepts.
Right. And of course, one of the reasons why there is this attempt to convert from theory to practice and vice versa quickly is because the problems are so important.
Yep.
So everybody's looking for solutions. So, you know, you see, be it microfinance as a solution to a problem, and you start really implementing it fully, even while the theorists are saying, well, hang on a minute, there's this problem, there's that problem with it. So this can be one of the reasons for the contestation, because of the promise and the lack of delivery in these different ways. One of the things I think we were trying to do through the book as security people was to actually say, no, development is inherently important. You can't instrumentalize it, but it nevertheless, in the longer term, it helps our security so much. So, you know, it is a priority, but you're doing it a disservice if you instrumentalize it in these ways.
Yes, and I think that's an important point to make, because of the two fields and the two academic disciplines at least, it's been security which has been far more sort of expansionist and imperial by nature, let's say. And so in a lot of the different issue areas that we study in the book, we see really quite a hierarchical relationship develop, whereby development concerns are largely subsumed into broader security agendas. We see this very clearly when it comes to the provision of aid. Where and how are we going to allocate aid budgets? And this is often sort of directed at a strategic level by broader security concerns.
I think the conclusions we drew about the relationship between security and development were actually to say that there are times when the agendas are compatible, but there are times when the agendas are really different. And that you cannot just say that there's a nexus. That the reality is that depending on the issue area, and actually depending on who within the two arenas is talking about it, the agendas can either be very similar or really very different. So I think we concluded that the idea of a nexus was really not proven, and in some senses could be counterproductive to the aims of both arenas, actually.